This story takes place in early 2003. I grew up in a northwest side Chicago neighborhood that back then wasn't the greatest. It's a lot different now, but back then it was pretty dangerous, and you had to be pretty street smart and able to take care of yourself. This was never an issue for me, given that I was a rebellious teenager and into the punk, skinhead, and hardcore music scene. My friends and I were often the ones to start circle pits at shows, get into fights, and cause trouble around the neighborhood. I guess you could say that I was somewhat of a juvenile delinquent. Those kids your parents would always warn you to never be like and would cross the street to avoid. Not something I'm proud of, but we all have our past, and it's what makes us who we are today. Fast forward a couple of years later, and I'm 19 and in college. I didn't have a car yet, and took public transportation to get around. This particular night, I was coming home late and had just gotten off the train, and I was walking home from the station, which is like a 5-minute walk from where I used to live. It was probably around 1 a.m., and I was walking down the same street that I had walked down countless times before. The streets were pretty empty, and as I'm walking, I noticed somebody across the street. I could tell it was a man, but I couldn't see him too well because he was surrounded by darkness. He was sitting on the front steps of a shop that was closed for the night smoking a cigarette. When he saw me, he immediately stood up, and as I was passing by him on the other side of the street, he crossed over to my side and started walking behind me. Slowly at first, but then I noticed him walking faster. I stopped and turned around, and noticed that he looked to be in his late 20s, tall, skinny, and wearing dark clothing. I'm only 5'6", so I'm not tall, but I am muscular, as I'm pretty active and work out regularly. When I stopped to turn around and look at him, he stopped too and leaned against the wall of one of the buildings smoking a cigarette, pretending not to notice me. I turned back around and kept walking, and he did too. I heard his footsteps getting closer to me again, so I stopped again and turned back to look at him, and he does the same thing. Stops, leans against a wall, smokes his cigarette pretending not to notice me, and looks at something inside of a store window. At this point, there's a bunch of red flags going off in my head, and I'm getting kind of nervous, but I kept walking as to not tip the guy off. He keeps up behind me, getting closer with each step. I get to the intersection of the street that I live on, and I stop, and the guy does too. Now, this is where my fight or flight response started to kick in. Here I am thinking that if I turn down my street, it's even darker, and will give him an opportunity to do something without being seen. And if I keep walking straight, he'll probably eventually catch up to me and do something. As I mentioned earlier, I've always been able to take care of myself pretty well, and I'm not a pussy, and I refuse to be a victim, so I say to myself, fuck it, if this guy wants to do something, I'm ready for a fight. I pull out my pocket knife that I always carried with me, and walked right up to the guy shouting to him, "Hey motherfucker, are you following me? You trying to jump me? Because you just picked the wrong fucking bowl. You trying to take my shit? What if I take your shit?" The guy sees the knife in my hand, and his face turns pale and he starts stuttering, "No man, no," and takes off like a bat out of hell. Full of adrenaline, I stupidly took off running after the guy, but he was pretty quick and I was not catching up to him, so I decided to stop chasing him. After a little while, I finally calmed down and ended up walking home. I don't know what his exact intentions were, but the way he was acting didn't seem like they were good. I never saw him again after that, and I have since moved away from that neighborhood. I'm 32 now, and I still drive by that neighborhood occasionally. Although it's much different now, I still remember that day. I was visiting my cousin in Rogers Park, Chicago this past summer. We were having a great time, and it was the first time I had been to Chicago in a long time. Living in Indiana is extremely boring, and there's not much to do, so I was thoroughly enjoying my visit. My cousin lived a very short walk from the beach, and every day we would walk his 7-month-old pit bull puppy up to the beach at around 3 a.m. The beaches were closed at that time, but it was not uncommon for people to be there anyway, and it was a beautiful sight at night with the moonlight hitting the water and reflecting off the tiny shards of glass in the beach, which were very annoying during the day when I had my shoes off. We would let his pup off of the leash, and she'd run up and down the beach and play with the other dogs that people had brought. On this night, hours before walking the dog, we had gotten pretty drunk and had gone to the movies, but we missed our showtime because my cousin decided not to wear his shoes. After 15 minutes debating the reason why we even wore shoes with the manager, we decided we'd go hammer a few more beers at the bar and return for a later show. After seeing the movie Straight Out of Compton, and my cousin pointing out every detail that was historically incorrect in the movie, him being a big fan of NWA, we got back to his place, drank a few more beers, and went on to follow our nightly routine. At this point we were wasted and stumbling down the street to the beach. I noticed that there was not many people out. Even though it was 3 a.m., the area he lived in was normally bustling, but there was no one out at all, other than a couple arguing in front of a Super 8 motel. But in our drunken stupor, we thought nothing of it and pushed on. When we got to the park just before the beach, something gave me a bad feeling. I don't know what it was, but I suddenly did not want anything to do with the beach. It seemed darker than normal, and I could see that there was absolutely no one there, when there was usually at least a few people. I told my cousin about my bad feeling and suggested that we just walk past the park. After some reluctance, he agreed and we began walking past. But just when we got to the footpath that led to the beach, he turned down it. And as my cousin can be a huge pain to reason with sometimes, I just followed. As we made our way to the beach, the path became more and more spooky, and I guess my cousin thought the same thing because he just stopped and stared down the path into the darkness. It looked like he was straining his eyes to see something. All of a sudden he said, "I don't like this. Let's go back." I said, "Dude, I was just about to turn around without you. This is creepy as hell." As soon as I said that, a man came from behind the playground equipment and started walking diagonally in front of us towards the street. My cousin did not see him at all, but I got a good look at what he was wearing, and alarm bells started going off immediately. The man was wearing a black, long, almost to the ground, trench coat, black boots, black pants, a black shirt, and a black baseball cap that was pulled down really low. That, coupled with him looking directly at the ground, made it so I could not see his face. This guy looked like the textbook creep, but what really made him stand out to me was that it was at least 80 degrees that night, and no one in their right mind would be wearing that much clothing, unless they were up to no good. I pointed him out to my cousin, and I shit you not, he said, "That's the creepiest looking guy I've ever seen. He looks like one of those people from the true scary stories I was telling you about from YouTube." After my cousin looked back at him, as if something from a fucking movie, the lights in the park went out all at once, and he disappeared. My heart started racing, and I could tell my cousin was freaking out too. We were in a pitch black park, with some guy who looked like fucking Jeepers Creepers, and we could not see anything except for the lights on the street ahead. We booked it the hell out of there, got to the streetlights, and started power walking to my cousin's apartment building. As we were walking, we walked past a few other apartment buildings, and we heard the familiar sounds of the dialing pads that you use to get into most of these buildings, followed by something like, "The number you entered is incorrect. Please try again." We heard this repeatedly as we walked by one of the buildings, and of course this grabbed our attention. As we got closer to the door, I looked over and saw the very same man that we had just seen in the park, leaning with his shoulder against the wall next to the dialing pad, head still down, jamming in random numbers on the keypad, assumingly trying to get into this building. I tapped my cousin saying, "That's the fucking guy, dude." And we stopped and stared at him like a couple of dumbasses. I guess he felt our stares because he looked at us, and I got my first good look at him. No, he didn't have an extremely wide smile or crazy eyes. He had on a bright yellow half ski mask with an oversized pair of sunglasses. He stared right at us, and we stared back for what seemed like 5 minutes. Then, he stood straight up and shifted his body so that he was facing us completely. This guy was fucking huge. We were a distance away from him in the park, but now that we were no more than 20 feet away, he was fucking massive. I swear I could feel him killing us with his mind. He pulled something shiny from his coat, and as if we had rehearsed it, my cousin scooped up his pup and we tore the hell out of there, looking back every few seconds to see if he was following us. He wasn't, and didn't. When we got back to my cousin's building, we made sure every door was locked on the way to the second floor where his apartment was. We didn't speak, and due to our drunkenness, passed out. Something like an hour later, I woke up. My cousin's studio apartment is directly above the door to the building on the first floor, and he always has his windows open. I heard dialing on the number pad downstairs, again followed by the number you have entered is incorrect. Please try again. I froze on the couch that I was sleeping on and listened while someone tried again and again to put in the right code, until I finally passed out. I assumed that he eventually gave up, because I didn't hear anything about him the following day, or any time after that. I really hope he is caught before he finally succeeds in whatever he was trying to do, because I am sure that that won't be his last attempt. I grew up in the quiet suburbs of Chicago. When I was 19, I wanted to be on my own and live in the actual city, so with the help of my parents, I got a 1-bedroom apartment in the city. Staying in the city was not cheap, so I was working 2 jobs. I was working so much that I was hardly even home. One night, I was off my night shift job, and the next day I was off from my day shift job. So when I got off at 11 p.m., I was excited that I could actually go home and just relax in my place. I got off of work, and I stopped by the gas station before arriving at my place just before midnight. I was exhausted from work, so much so that I sat down on my couch, and I almost instantly fell asleep. I woke suddenly, and I was overcome with this feeling that someone was watching me. When I opened my eyes, my heart dropped. There was a man standing over me. All he said was, "Thank you for making it so easy." He held his hand up in the air, and in his hand were my keys. In my exhausted state, I must have left the keys in my door. He then dropped my keys, turned around, and walked out of my apartment. I got up right away and locked my door. A few days later, as I was exiting my building, I froze when I saw the man who was in my apartment. He came over to me and said that he was my neighbor. He saw my keys in the door and did that to teach me a lesson. He also told me to be careful, that I was a young woman in a big city, and it was a good thing that he was the one who saw my keys in the door. Even though it scared me half to death, it did indeed teach me a lesson. I never again left my keys in the door. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you left a like, shared it with your friends, and subscribed for future content. I post at least 5 new videos a week, so if that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend you subscribe to stay up to date. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check out the description for information on how to submit your stories. And just so you know, I'm still looking for stories to represent every state, so make sure you send in your stories if you would like a chance to represent your state. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier
if it's true.
It was August, and I was just outside of Chicago, Lake County, in a place with a crime rate of -2 crimes per year. This is all weirder when you hear this story. It was late summer in Chicago, early in the evening. I had nothing fun to do, but I did have a dog that needed to be walked. I'd been playing Xbox all day, and let me tell you, seeing the same explosions and gunshots for 3 hours straight gets really annoying, so I decided to walk my dog Dingy. Yes, named after the type of boat. I was also hoping I would see the girl that I liked while I was walking her. The route I take is really simple. It's a square, with my house being on the top of the square. The way I walk is, walk to the left, turn left, walk down that street, turn left, rinse, and repeat. On the third street, which is the one closest to mine for those keeping count at home, I saw a man shuffling down the street. He was stammering something that my brain could barely register, in a weird voice that still creeps me out thinking about it. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. I can't really describe what he was saying, but it was high and stuttering nonsense. Then, I noticed the central object of this encounter. Not a gun, not a knife, but crazily enough, a fucking pizza box. Just then, Dingy falls back and starts whimpering. I want to run badly, but I kinda just stand there. Then I can make out what he's saying. I'm done with my pizza. All in a hoarse voice. Then I realize that he's talking to me. He gets closer, all the while yelling, "I'm done with my pizza! I'm done with my pizza!" Then, before I can figure out what to do, he's right in front of me. "I'm done with my pizza," he says. "Oh," I say, trying to sound calm and collected, while freaking out on the inside. "Here," he says, then thrusts the box at me. "I'm done with my pizza." "I can't take it right now," I say. Then, he gets closer and I can smell the pizza on his breath, along with other indescribable scents. "I'm done with my pizza," he whispers. Here is where I would like to say, and then I ran to my neighbor's house and called the police. And then I slapped him across the face like a total badass. But no, I took the pizza box and gave up. "Fine, I'll take it," I said as I grabbed it. He backed off, let out this weird groan, and looked at Dingy. "Is that a boy dog? Or a girl?" he asked. "Girl," I reply. He lets his lip hang open, and he just stares at my dog. "Okay," he says, and walks off. I stay there until I know he won't come back, and then go to my neighbor's house to throw out the box. I booked it home after that, and told my dad. It turns out, it was a mentally handicapped man that we all know as the tennis ball guy. If you live in my town, you'll see him listening to music from presumably a phone and dribbling 2 tennis balls, all the while walking in this weird shuffle. He also wears a weird backpack that's freaking huge, and it says Dora on the back. I still see him from time to time, but I pretend not to. I still get really scared when I walk my dog all alone. I wanted to include this as a bonus story, so that way immediately after it I could actually give my thoughts on this one. I have 2 different ways of looking at it. The first way, I'll put myself in the shoes of the OP. Going through what they went through, I think I would be really creeped out in this situation as well, because you don't know what that person is capable of, so I can completely understand why you would be afraid. Now looking at it from the other side of the fence, in the man's shoes, he could be a really nice guy who just has some mental disabilities and can't afford the professional help he needs. I can imagine he might even be scared being in the situation he's in, or he might not even notice. Either way, I really hope the guy gets the help he needs, because he's probably not too bad of a guy. But I really don't know, I don't live there. I really appreciate those of you who stuck around till the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed this little bonus story. I hope you all have a great day, and thanks again for watching.